right? When we're building a building, we have to be concerned about mold, because mold's in the air, and all it needs is a little moisture, and it's going to start growing on anything that's organic. And in construction, we have lots of material that is organic. Now, mold is a member of the fungi plant family, and it doesn't need sunlight to grow. Really, all it needs is moisture and some carbon-based material to grow. We're going to be talking a little bit about mold in this video, actually quite a bit in depth, trying to give you an idea of what you can do to make a difference in the building process. Now, many molds are harmless. Some molds are actually beneficial. For example, penicillin is an antibiotic that has saved many lives, and it's a mold. Other molds can be toxic. Now, what does a toxic mold do? What's so bad about this type of mold? Well, this type of mold can make people sick, and most of the time they're minor illnesses. Irritation of the eyes, irritation of the nose, maybe the throat is a little irritated. Sometimes a little more serious, they could have diarrhea or a headache or something like a flu-like symptom. But where we really get concerned is in rare cases, mold can actually start growing inside a person's lungs. Or the lungs can start bleeding as a result of mold, and this is more common in infants. Now, mold lawsuits are all over the place, and some of them are frivolous lawsuits, granted. But other ones where infants have died or been very complications of asthma that really caused a person, and it's traced right to the neglect of the contractor or the subcontractor or the design professional. Some of these are legitimate. However, all the illegitimate or frivolous lawsuits really put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. As a contractor, we want to do things right. We want to build the best type of building for our clients. We want to give them the best service. We want to be the professional that every owner would want to look for when they go to build a building. And so we want to become as educated as we can about what we can do to prevent mold from growing inside buildings that we build. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the concerns are in construction. Construction materials that are organic, let's just think about it for a moment. The paper on drywall. Mold loves to grow on paper and drywall. All it needs is a little bit of moisture. For example, look underneath the sink someplace where there's been some leaking of the pipes, and the paper on the sheetrock on the back of the sink. You see splotches of mold. Not all that's toxic mold. A lot of it's harmless. A little bit of bleach, and I think it's 1 cup of bleach to 1 gallon of water. Keep it damp for 20 minutes, you kill the mold. This is something to keep in mind. Mold goes dormant when it's dry. So just because we dry it out does not mean that we've killed it. It can be dormant up to 20 years. You get a little more moisture, it's alive again. If we find any mold on any of our projects, in the carpet, in the insulation, in the sheetrock, ceiling tile, any place, we find mold, we get rid of it. We tear the sheetrock out, or we throw the construction material out, whatever it is. We do not want to be trying to dry out mold, or to starve mold somehow, or even trying to kill it with bleach. That's not our business. Our business is to build the best buildings for our clients, and that means getting rid of that mold completely. If you find mold on your job, get it out of your job. What can a contractor do? Number one, we're going to question the design of the building and the performance of our subcontractors. Let's not just take it for granted that the architect knows what he's doing. Most of them do. They're very professionals. These are people that have studied architectural. They went to many seminars on mold. They know how to protect against the moisture penetrating the building envelope. Most of these architects have no problems designing a building that will resist moisture penetration. But we can't take it for granted. For example, just because the plan may show a wall detail, and we don't see any moisture barrier on that wall detail. It's not good enough just to build that as per plan and specification. If there's no vapor barrier, no moisture barrier on that wall, we need to ask the architect about it. Documentation. Write out a written RFI. Send it to the architect. Do we need a moisture barrier on this wall? How are we going to control moisture from getting into the building? So, number one thing we do in mold is question. We're going to question the architect and question our subcontractors. Now, just because a subcontractor shows up, do not assume that the subcontractor knows what he's doing. Number one, most of the time they do know what they're doing. But then we have to figure in the laziness factor. Some of them know what they're doing, but they're too lazy to do it right. And then figure in the greed factor. Some of them know what they're doing, but they're so greedy they want to cut corners to make more money. Remember this, a lot of these employees for the subcontractors are not paid well. A lot of them may be paid $6 or $7, just a little bit above minimum wage. And they're going there and they're punching in the time clock in the morning, going to work, they're putting in their hours and they're going home. And they really don't care about the job. They don't care if they properly installed the vapor barrier. They don't care if they properly installed the roof. They don't care if the windows were properly installed or the door hardware was properly installed. And this type of negligence on the part of a low-paid worker costs the general contractor and the owner of the subcontracting firm lots of money, not to mention all the problems it causes for the owner of the building. And as general contractors, we want to be the professionals that please the owner. We want to provide them with a top-notch building. And so we're not going to let some low-paid worker slough off on his job and make all kinds of problems for other people. That means we question what they're doing. We question their quality of work. We are constantly inspecting, looking at what they're doing, reading the submittals. In the submittals there should be instructions, installation instructions. Let's read those installation instructions, make sure that they're installing correctly. If you have a quality control manual with a checklist on it from industry standards, go through that checklist, check item by item by item. Make sure the roof is installed properly. Make sure flashing is installed properly. Make sure caulking joints are installed properly. Windows, weather stripping. Make sure everything is installed properly on this building to prevent any instances of mold. Another area that we have to be careful of is the proper storage of materials. Any of the building components that go on the inside of the building, we want to make sure that they are stored in protected facilities, such as roll-off containers or storage trailers, because we do not want dirt, which is organic matter, blowing in to these materials. Take, for example, the carpet, or let's say the ductwork for the building, ceiling tile, sheetrock, things like this. We do not want to be storing them outside where they're exposed to weather, because they can get dirt, they can get damp, they can become food for mold, and that's what we don't want. Let's just take, for example, ductwork. The HVAC contractor builds his ductwork and he stages it outside. Okay? The wind blows dirt into the ducts. Okay? Then the HVAC contractor takes the ductwork inside the building, he installs it. Now the specifications don't specify that he has to clean his ducts, so there's no duct cleaning involved in his contract. He installs hundreds of linear feet of ductwork throughout the building. All this ductwork has had dirt blown inside it. Okay? Then they turn on the air conditioning system. Something isn't quite right. You get condensation inside the ductwork. Okay? Maybe it's cold air blowing through a hot attic, and you get condensation. happening on this duct. So you get water, moisture. And what happens with moisture and organic material? Mold starts growing. Oh, mold in the worst possible place, right in the ventilation system. So this mold is not in one little area, but the ventilation system is blowing it throughout the building. Why? Because the ductwork was stored outside before construction. Something very simple to prevent, but simply overlooked a lot of times because the general contractor thought this HVAC contractor is a professional, the owner is an engineer, he's got project managers that are college educated and have years and years of experience. I don't need to question them. All I do is pay them the big bucks that they ask for, and they're going to put in that system like a professional should. That's an assumption that's made, and it can be a costly assumption that results with mold inside of our building. And so the second point in what we can do to prevent mold is inspect. Let's inspect the work. Using our checklists, if we have a quality control manual, the windows, when the caulking is done, let's get out the hose with the water test, do water tests on the windows, make sure that they're properly installed, make sure that moisture is not going to be penetrating our windows, test our weather stripping on our doors. Let's inspect the installation of these things. For example, the roof systems. Almost every roofing company, manufacturer, will have a representative who you can call or you can email and you can ask specific questions. If it's not in your checklist, if it's not in the submittals, ask specific questions. How much asphalt needs to be used in between plies on the felt? Any question that you have. What about the cap sheet? How long can the felt be exposed before we put the cap sheet on? What about the flashing? How far up the wall does it have to be flashed? How much overlap has to be done? Any of your questions. Coping material, and the installation of that. Any question you have. These representatives for these manufacturers are more than happy to talk to you and to let you know what the proper installation is going to be. So let's inspect that. So many of our warranty items that come up after we build buildings and turn them over come from leaky roofs, come from moisture penetration, and it costs so much money we end up replacing ceiling tiles and sheetrock and carpet, sometimes furniture, sometimes merchandise where it's a retail facility. So much money can be saved if we get a proper roof on that building. Roofing is very important, as well as I had mentioned already, the window installation and the doors installation. We want to keep moisture out of the building. The third point of how we can handle mold is train. Now, I'm not talking about our employees. I'm not even talking about the subcontractor. I'm talking about the owner. Okay? A lot of times the owner takes over the building and he doesn't know about proper maintenance. So we need to train the owners proper maintenance, how to inspect. For example, the caulking joints in the control joints in the brick. That caulking is not going to stay there forever. After 10 or 15 years, that's all the warranty is on it. If it was improperly installed, which hopefully we can prevent that, but we do have a guy out there making $7 or $8 an hour installing this caulking. If it was improperly installed, it might start peeling away after 2 or 3 years. So it's a good idea to let the owner know to inspect different things. Inspect the roof, walk up on the roof, see if there's blisters on the roof. Because improperly installed roof may start to blister. And while that roof is still under warranty, the owner doesn't have to wait till the water's actually coming through the roof to spot the problem. And so properly train how to maintain the air conditioning and heating system, the ventilation system, so that the building is properly cooled and dried out. How to work the sprinkler system. One of the issues that happens often is the sprinkler for the lawn, the irrigation system, they get it directed where it's spraying on the building. And if we have stucco on the building, that sprinkler system, for example, can abuse the building so much that the building wasn't made to have that constant water on there all the time. And so then the stucco system fails. The moisture barrier fails on that stucco system because of so much water. And that's something that the owner needs to be aware of, because that's an abuse and that's not going to be covered underneath a warranty. So let's talk a little bit about this whole phenomenon of moisture getting inside the building. And this is a little repetitive, but really let's just follow it a little bit. We have a building. We're just going to make this a square building for easy's sake. And we're going to air condition, climate control this building, which means inside the building we're going to have low pressure, right? Because we're going to have low pressure. And on the outside of the building, we're going to have high pressure. So we've got low pressure on the inside, high pressure on the outside. What does that mean? That means that this high pressure is going to want to come in to the low pressure from all sides of the building. You got this high pressure pushing on the building, trying to get any crack, any crevice, any little pore that it can sneak through. It's going to be getting through. And what does this high pressure have with it? In many climates, it has humidity, or simply put, we can say it has humid air. And so when the high pressure pushes its way inside the building, it brings with it humid air, which means that the air conditioning system has to dry that air out, or the ventilating system has to dry that air out. And if the ventilating system is not designed to handle the high volume of air that can come in through cracks and crevices, this humid air is going to overwhelm the air conditioning system. Let me give you an example. Take a door and prop it open, an exterior door on a building, and prop it open. And then walk down the hallway 50 feet, if it's a door that goes into the hallway, and measure how much humidity is in that air. Go to another area of the building where there's no door and measure the humidity there. And you'll find that the humidity by that open door is incredibly high, because the building design for the ventilation system is not designed to handle all that humid air coming in through that open door. And what you do when you open up a door, now you got this great big opening here, and all this humid air comes rushing in to the building. And so when we're building the building at the end of the project, when we've got the air conditioning system on, that really needs to be closed, and the owner needs to be trained that there's a closure on that door to maintain the door closed. So don't get a block of wood or a brick and set in front of the door to prop it open. If the owner wants something like that, he needs to let the architect know, so that the architect and the engineer, the design team, can design something like a revolving door or dual entrance door, something like that, so that they can cool a building like that. Or an air door or air window where the air conditioning blows straight down over the door opening if the door has to be open. That's something that's come into design criteria. And so if the owner has not let the architect know about that, that's something we have to let them know, is if you prop open these doors, your system is not going to work, and a lot of humid air is going to come in to the building. Now I want to touch a little bit on perception and reality. A lot of people say, you know, mold is so old that there was mold growing in the Garden of Eden before Adam and Eve were even created. So, what's the problem? There's always been mold, and we never had to worry about this 20 years ago or 50 years ago. What's the issue? You see, an argument like that is based on reality. But what we are in today is perception. Reality does not matter that much. What matters is perception. If a client sees mold, their perception is that it's bad. Their perception is that it could be deadly. And if that client gets a lawyer and they go to court, the jury's perception is going to be the same. And so as builders, we have to be concerned about perception, not only reality. So the perception that mold is bad is the reality that we must deal with. We cannot try to argue with an owner that somehow the mold isn't as bad as what they think it is, because we're on the losing end of that argument. We have to do all we can to make sure that our building envelope is sealed, to make sure that our air conditioning and heating systems are tested and balanced, that they're working properly, to make sure subcontractors and their employees properly install the various systems that they are to install, to make sure that interior building components are not stored in the exterior exposed to weather conditions, and to document all of our questions that we have regarding the design of the building system. This is the way that we provide superior construction. This is the way that we provide outrageous customer service, so that our clients know that when they hire us as their general contractor, they're getting the absolute best construction that they can. We must not settle for anything less. Hold the standards high and enforce them.